And away we go. It's the DFS Early Bird right here from awesemo.com. Dan Strafford, Dave Lockwood along with you on this Monday morning. I'm back. Emac back to the back burner. Love you, Emac. I know you're listening. And I'll be filling in for Emac on Saturday's show. You get more of me this week. But Dave Lockwood is the reason most of you are here. Dave, how the hell are you doing?
Not bad, man. Not bad. Pretty solid weekend. Enjoying life and taking it one day at a time, you know?
I do know. I am acutely aware of how that works. Hope everyone had a fun, safe, and not hangover-inducing St. Patrick's Day. If you are nursing one, then you get to listen to us. So there you go. Let's dive in. 9 games on this NBA slate. Tons of Q tags and outs already listed. We have the CJ McCollum injury. You have the Kyle Lowry injury. Doncic dealing with an injury as well. You have Russell Westbrook suspended for Monday night because of the 16th technical rule. What do you got? What are beyond those guys? Any others that we need to keep an eye on for potentially being out or that are already out on this slate?
It'd definitely be cool if the Oklahoma City Thunder had a better matchup. But what are you going to do, right? Squaring off against a Miami team. Look, they're not great. They're 8th in the East, and they play solid defense. I had mentioned to Manny on Sirius XM yesterday that if Miami faced Milwaukee in round 1, I give Miami one game, and I would give them one game. And I think that's actually saying a lot, simply based on the fact that they do play solid defense, and they are the best or second best, depending on last time I looked a few days ago, second best team or first best team at preventing points in the paint, which is exactly where the Milwaukee Bucks thrive. Well, where Giannis thrives outside of that 3-point shooting, but Malcolm Brogdon's out. So I just thought that was, an interesting conversation to have. If Miami faced Milwaukee, I'd give them a win. And I actually think they'd play the Bucks closer than a lot of other teams in the conference. So it'll be fun to see. But Paul George is still 9,700 on DraftKings, even with Russell Westbrook suspended and DraftKings having the time to make adjustments.
Right.
Outside of that, you have guys like Rashawn Holmes and Tyler Johnson. They're questionable, not a huge deal. DeMarcus Cousins left late in that game against OKC with the foot injury. He's questionable as well. So is Kevin Durant. So that's a big deal right there. If they both happen to be out or one of them happens to be out, even against a red-hot Spurs team, you're going to have to make some moves on that one. Kawhi Leonard doubtful. I think you mentioned it with load management. Kyle Lowry also doubtful. That's interesting. Gordon Hayward doubtful. And then a bunch of other questionable guys that could come into play, like Dennis Smith and Ntilikina both remain questionable. If they both sit, well, we can get into that. Kevin Love questionable. And then you have Thompson and Larry Nance already ruled out. Blake Griffin questionable as well. But as you can see, there's definitely a lot that could sway this slate and shift the foundation entirely.
Yeah, it'd be intriguing if both Boogie and Durant are out, if Durant ends up missing more because of, what was it, an ankle injury that he was dealing with?
Yeah, and it was late in that game where he went out too, actually, in that loss to Phoenix.
I know Kerr said that he expected him to play, but still questionable tag. Still need to wait to see exactly what happens. So
it looks like he's good, though, but still, as you said, listed as questionable, yeah.
One to keep an eye on. But let's dive in here. We'll go point guard through center as we always do. Don't forget, if you are a new listener here, you can use the promo code EARLYBIRD to head on over to awesemo.com. Get 50% off your first month there. As always, we love for likes and subscriptions over on the YouTube page. Leave a comment. Be happy to read it here on the podcast. Apparently, I caught some folks off guard last week with my bad sex joke at the end of the podcast. If you haven't heard it, go back and listen because it's another view. But we'll hope to do the same on this podcast. Keep you guys laughing, keep you entertained throughout as we dive in at point guard, where we have Westbrook already off the slate here. That starts us off with Steph Curry at 9,300 in what is a pretty decent matchup against San Antonio Spurs. The Spurs have gotten better at defense as the year has gone on. Popovich crediting, I believe, Derek White and Jacob Poeltl the most for how their defense has turned around over the past month or so, but still a decent matchup here for Curry. Irving, Lillard at 9K. Booker, Mitchell are at 82 and 85. You have Doncic at 8,900. Zach LaVine against Phoenix. Alfred Payton here for New Orleans at 7,500. And then we scroll past 7K, and we'll get to the mid-tier in a short order. Who are some of your favorite top plays here on the pricier end of point guard?
All right. Well, no Westbrook, and that's a fascinating one. Let's see what happens with DeMarcus Cousins. I think he's a legitimate questionable play here. Even if Durant plays and Cousins is out, and you get minutes from like Bogut and Looney, or whoever it is, we know that Cousins on the floor has made a big impact on Stephen Curry. So if he's out, I do like Curry here, no question. Last game, 33 minutes, but he lost around 3 minutes at the end of that game as they were blowing OKC out. So, finished with 51, probably would have been up around 57 with the way he was shooting. The other guys in the 9 range is like Kyrie Irving against Denver. I don't hate it. I like him more if Cousins plays, obviously, and he's had 2 monster games in a row, averaging a triple-double over his last 2. And he's on a mission right now, man. Brad Stevens is giving him huge minutes, as he has been in competitive games, as it needs to be. Look, this team right now is the Sixers just won a really impressive win over the Bucks. And that put them, they were already 3rd in the East, but that put them now a full game ahead of the Pacers for the first time since they've been locked up for the past week and a half. The Celtics are now 2 full games behind the Sixers. So obviously, if they're looking to finish 3rd in the conference, obviously, or 4th to at least get home court advantage. Every game for the Celtics is big right now. So I'd expect Irving to continue to see monster minutes here down the stretch, especially against Denver in a game that, I would assume both of us think this game should stay very, very competitive. Boston 3-point favorites, 222.5 total. It's a pretty likable game for sure. I'm curious on what to do with. Actually, I'm not really curious, but I found it interesting that Fred VanVleet ended up playing 31 minutes, right? Yesterday, right. Sunday. But he didn't start the game. He started the second half. Jeremy Lin started the first half. So if you look at this one, it was Jeremy Lin played 16 minutes and 40 seconds on the game. VanVleet was the first player off the bench, did start the second half, didn't have a huge game, but played 31 minutes. Against the Knicks, I think we all know what to do. With Lowry and Kawhi doubtful, you're not going to find a better value play than Fred VanVleet on this slate. Let's talk about one more guy that's triple-doubled in 4 straight games. Elfrid Payton has been outrageously good.
Sir.
Just putting up monster numbers. Russell Westbrook light is what we've seen from him lately. And look, no Drew Holiday has made a colossal difference, right? And Anthony Davis playing only 21 minutes per game. Elfrid Payton's been great. And he's done so in some difficult matchups, right? One against Atlanta, very easy. One against Phoenix, very easy. And then 2 sandwiched in between were Milwaukee and Portland. So I don't see Dallas as that difficult if he's going to play 36 minutes and continue to produce as he has. I'm not locking in another triple-double, but, man, he's just been so productive. He's getting so many opportunities. He's leading the team in touches. The assist opportunities per game are through the roof. He's another great option here. And then, of course, we'll pay attention to what happens. Will Emmanuel Mudiay be in play here with no Kawhi and no Lowry? Maybe this game actually stays close. The Knicks coming off a very emotional win over the Lakers at Madison Square Garden, where Mario Hezonja blocked LeBron James on the last possession of the game. That made me happy. But look, he's going to play, if these guys are out, he's played, 36, 33 minutes. He's going to get huge run here. He's still sub 5K. There are plenty of targets, Dan, and I guess I'll ask you about this one too. What are your thoughts on, because point guard value actually could be really deep even without this player I'm about to mention. What are your thoughts on Dennis Schroeder with Russell Westbrook out facing Miami? Because on one hand, he's going to get a ton of work. On the other hand, it is Miami, and he hasn't exactly been good lately. Actually, Dennis Schroeder, outside of one game, which came against Utah, has been dismal.
I probably will stay away just because I assume he'll be chalk at 5,100. I assume everyone's going to see Westbrook out, and then assume you plug and play Schroeder. He's 5,100, so it's not like his price is exorbitant here. But I don't expect to play much of any of him on this slate. The matchup, I think Miami's 28th in pace, if I looked at that correctly.
You could be right. I haven't looked.
It's just a game a position I'm not really a fan of. I'd rather go to Paul George if I'm playing anyone in that contest. I know it's a humongous price discrepancy, but I once looking at the slate and I knew Westbrook was out, I'm assuming Schroeder's 20% owned, 18 to 20% owned.
Might be higher, yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
and that's just too much for me.
Miami 26 in pace over the last, since the trade deadline. Look, I think Schroeder's a perfectly reasonable play here. That, he does have shooting guard eligibility too, which makes him more appealing. And then, you get into the question of, does Lowry actually sit? Are Ntilikina and Smith going to be out? Those things will make a big difference for me. If all of that comes up, I think Schroeder's ownership declines quite a bit. But as we have it now, let's assume that Moutier is the guy. You're going to have Van Vliet, you're going to have Dennis Schroeder, and you're going to have Moutier. And I'm not talking about three guys that are just whatever at their prices. Actually, those are really appealing value plays, regardless of matchup. I'd have them point per dollar wise, all three of them at the top of the position. So you're going to have a decent amount of options. And I'll even throw out, if you're just looking to go stars and scrubs in tournaments, Raymond Felton probably plays like 24 minutes in this game. And, he is the dead minimum. If he goes out and gives you 23 fantasy points, 25 fantasy points, you're definitely not dead. But he's obviously just a super low-end flyer at the dead min across the board.
Did you see the end of the Pelicans-Phoenix Suns game?
I did not. Oh, the overtime game. I
Yeah.
thought you were talking about Sunday. Yeah.
The no foul.
Yep.
Oh my God.
Yep.
And the announcer, bless his soul, like whoever the play-by-play announcer, like was just spot on, going, "What is happening?"
I know.
What are they doing right now? What is happening?
It's inexplicable.
Oh, so amazing to watch. If you haven't seen it, it's still on Twitter. I came across it.
It was everywhere on Twitter last night.
It was amazing. It was absolutely crazy to see. So yeah, Saturday night was when it was posted. So pretty crazy ending. And I know multiple people said, well, the tank is strong there in New Orleans. I just think disfranchisement of the players is so large there right now with the injuries. I don't even think it's tanking. I think it's just get us the hell out of here. We don't want to play anymore.
You know what, though? The reason I say it's inexplicable is because you would think that so here's the thing. They go out and they beat it's funny. A friend of mine on Twitter the other day, when I mentioned that the Phoenix Suns had beat just over the last week at the time of tweeting the Milwaukee Bucks and then the Golden State Warriors at the Oracle, right? And he's like, man, Kokoshkov and this organization have it right. They they know how to tank, beat the good teams and stay interesting, and then lose to the bad teams. And I said, listen, if they were good enough to beat the good teams when they wanted to, why would they tank? Right? Like, I mean, you can't be like, okay, we're going to go out here and beat the Warriors and Bucks, fellas, and then we're going to lose to the Memphis Grizzlies just to get that pick. No, of course not. Like, I totally understand what he was saying because they've somehow recently found a way to stay interesting. But that's why in a spot like this, where you just went out and you beat the Bucks and you beat the Warriors, it is inexplicable. But then at the same time, I think the point he was making is they're playing their asses off against the good teams just to be that spoiler role, just to make it interesting. Sure. And then against the less good teams, winning against them really isn't a priority when it's like, oh, you lost to them. When you beat the Bucks, when you beat the Warriors, it's in the headlines. So
and there's some pride there. Yeah, sure.
Sure. Yeah, I think so. But I mean, what a strange situation it really is, especially the end of that game.
Yeah, absolutely. Crazy ending, and one to go watch and go check out for sure. Let's move over to shooting guard. Again, reminder, somebody who's just tuning in for the first time.
I'm getting it backwards, aren't I? Did the Suns win that game?
The Suns ended up winning that game, yeah.
Yeah, I was getting it all backwards.
Yeah, no, but I agree with the Suns take of how they went about that, but it was Suns down 3. Got the ball in. Play-by-play announcer said, why aren't they fouling? Talking about the Pelicans. They're up 3. Right. Why aren't they fouling? Josh Jackson then hits an improbable 3. And then a coach on the bench calls timeout when they had no timeouts. What? Like what?
I know. I got it mixed. I thought the Suns had lost.
Yeah, the Pels
I
ended up,
got the
and like,
coaching mixed up. Yeah,
and it didn't even look like the Pels were going to come back on the court to run out the clock. Like
amazing.
they're just like
No, it's outrageous. Both, yeah.
both franchises not
Dreadful.
doing very well right now. But let's talk some shooting guard. And for those of you who are commenting that Dave had it backwards, we already talked about that, so you don't need to hit send on that comment on YouTube.
That's correct.
Shooting,
Happy to correct my mistakes as we
exactly.
go.
Shooting guard. And listen, what I was going to say there is Dave has the deep dive Monday, Wednesday, Friday. If you're new to awesemo.com, we will be transitioning to baseball in the not too distant future, obviously, where you'll get Adam and Dave in a similar role herein with the deep dive and the deep bird dive for baseball. More plans in the works as well for content on the baseball side. But for now, Monday, Wednesday, Friday of Dave writing the deep dive, and he'll cover off on the injuries, but also go more in depth with analysis across all of these positions and make sure to have you prepared for Monday's slate. Shooting guard leads off with Bradley Beal. He's at 9,400. Matchup here with the Utah Jazz. He continues to be a usage monster, continues to put up large point totals, whether through just shooting or, a mix of rebounds, assists, throwing in 2 or 3 steals, maybe a block here and there. He's 9,400 here. We don't have Westbrook. We don't have anybody above 10K on the slate, right? Because Westbrook's out. So is this a Bradley Beal sort of day?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny when you're thinking star scrubs. I had mentioned it a minute ago. When you're talking star scrubs, you're talking like Paul George, Curry, and maybe Jokic. Like fitting in 3 9K guys instead of 2 11K guys, or Irving, or whatever. I'm not even saying you have to do it, but that's what it's going to come down to. I actually like these type of slates, Dan. I like the ones where your highest price guys are in the 9K range. It definitely makes things more interesting. I mean, the way that Beal is playing, yeah, his price has come down. It was baked in the matchups baked into this match, or the price tag. The matchups baked into the price tag, and it was against Memphis too in the last game. Because we saw him go from 97 and 98 and then 95 down 93, 94. So you've seen the price drop a couple $100. He went out and dropped 40 points and 65 fantasy points against Memphis. Now, I believe that game went to overtime as well. There's too much basketball to remember all this lately. I thought that went to overtime. I could be wrong. No, it didn't. It was just a super high scoring game. That's what it was. Yeah, super high scoring game. And Bradley Beal was spectacular once again. I mean, he could really then at this price, I don't think it's crazy. Even against Utah, he's just seeing so much work. And the amazing thing is his usage rate. Since the deadline is right around 30%. I checked on Friday. I could look again real quick, but it was right around 29.5%. It wasn't 38%. It wasn't anything insane. The biggest thing, though, and this is what makes him such a ridiculously good fantasy play each day, is when you're getting usage up around 30%, and you're also rebounding and facilitating well enough on top of, and here it comes, 40 minutes a night.
Right.
That is a game changer, right? You're talking about him getting ample work while he's on the floor and then just absolutely getting as many minutes as he possibly wants. I mean, check this out. They play the first leg of a back-to-back against they play a first leg of a back-to-back against the Hornets on, I think it was Friday, right? On Friday. Bradley Beal plays 45 minutes.
Yeah.
All right. 40 points, 15 of 29 shooting, 7 for 13 from 3, but 45 minutes. The very next night, he plays 39 minutes and drops 40 points again. Scott Brooks does not care right now. And this is when you have an opportunity to play 45 minutes in regulation, not going to project him for that. I'm still projecting him for 39 minutes, though. And when that's the case, yes, Bradley Beal, I know it's a roundabout way of me getting there, but I still think he's very much in play. Look, I think Devin Booker's a strong option as well, 8,500. If Tyler Johnson's out, I like him more. I just like knowing that he's going to, see even more opportunity as a point guard.
Right.
20 assists over his last 2 games. Tyler Johnson's last game he played was the 13th. So these 2 games that he's been out, Bradley or Devin Booker's, racked up 20 total assists and has looked really, really strong. So I like Booker as well. I think he's still very reasonably priced against a bad Chicago defense. There's nothing redeeming about this Chicago defense. They got a few guys that can score, right? But aside from that, look, they are 27th in defensive rating since the deadline. But not only that, they're actually averaging around 101 possessions per 48 since the deadline, which is up from what we had seen before that. I like Booker here. I also like that this game should be competitive. The Suns are actually 3-point favorites in a 229 total game. So those 2 guys at the top are very much in play. We'll wait and see what's going on with Cousins. If he plays, I'm not interested in Curry. If not, I've told you why I think he's very viable. Levine's close enough in price to Booker where I'd rather just go Booker here, Dan.
Sure.
And yes, you have Kelly Oubre and Ayton, but he's not a high volume guy. I'll take Booker, especially if Johnson's out over Levine, who is still, you still have Markkanen, you still have Otto Porter. There's still a decent amount of players on that team, and Zach LaVine needs to score right now to really bolster those fantasy totals. As far as value goes here, Van Vliet has multi-position eligibility on DraftKings. So does Dennis Schroeder, which is really nice. I don't believe Moutier does, right? I don't think Moutier has multi-position eligibility here, but it wouldn't surprise me. No, he doesn't. Nevertheless, there's going to be plenty of ways that Felton does too, if you're interested in getting crazy there. And then Norman Powell's not the craziest play either. No more CJ Miles, no more DeLon Wright. So if Lowry or if Kawhi Leonard is in fact out, I think Powell will probably see a decent amount of opportunity. And my guess, Dan, is that when it comes to point guards, you're probably going to be playing a point guard, or you're probably going to have a decent amount of guards in your lineups where you can, being that a lot of these cheap guys have MPE. That's a huge thing on DraftKings tonight.
With that thought in mind, or maybe thinking more specifically about shooting guards who are more shooting guard first or shooting guard small forwards, there is a mid-tier here that I find at least mildly intriguing with Jalen Brunson, Bogdanovich, and Josh Richardson at 61, 59, and 5,900 respectively. Any of those 3 maybe enter in if you're thinking more of a balanced lineup stretch here, going a bunch of guys in that sort of 6 to 7K range?
I found one thing strange the other night. On Saturday, Jalen Brunson played only 26 minutes in a 5-point win over the Cleveland Cavaliers. And mind you, Luka Doncic sat that night.
Yep.
With Brunson up over 6K and Doncic off the injury list, expected to return on this one, I will happily, or at least from what I saw, Doncic is expected to play, right? Yeah, probable. So to me, it's hard to get to Brunson. Who else did you mention?
Josh Richardson and Bogdanovich.
Richardson against OKC is pretty interesting just because you're getting a massive pace increase. I don't have an issue with him. Actually, he's very risky. I think he should actually be a little bit cheaper than he is. But hey, Miami's fighting for a playoff spot. Dude, it's so important late in the season to actually pay attention to that stuff. Earlier in the year, it doesn't mean a thing.
Right.
You're talking about a Miami Heat team that is 8th place in the East. The Orlando Magic, are 1 game behind them. They're tied in the win column. They're 2 games back in the loss column. If the Miami Heat lose this game, they become what? They're holding on by a half a game. And they're only 2 games up on the Hornets. It is a logjam there from that 8th seed down through the 11. They need to win every game they can, which makes sense that Richardson's played 37 and 38 minutes over his last 2 games. I don't mind that at all. As far as Bogdanovich goes, I think you can do better. I respect Portland's defense. I think because they don't have any, super dominant wing players in terms of on ball, or ball dominant guys, I would expect Aminu to see a lot of him, and that just makes him a little bit less appealing as a spot up guy.
All right, let's take that turn to small forward. A couple of those guys, Winslow and Bogdanovich, both small forward eligible. Made mention already, Doncic is probable to play Monday with this knee/bruise issue for his right knee. Let's talk Paul George here at 9,700. You already touched on. KD should be back at 88. And then you have the likes of DeMar DeRozan. You have Otto Porter Jr., Kelly Oubre, Tatum, Parker, and then the guys I mentioned, Bogdanovich and Richardson. Paul George, thoughts quickly here, and then moving on to some of these other guys.
Yeah, it's Miami, but I mean, how are you going to argue against this? Like, let me ask you, Dan, to play devil's advocate. Serious question. Do you have an argument against playing Paul George at this price point? You can try your best.
I don't. It's still sub 10K and putting up a floor of 45, 40, right? I mean, 45 to 50.
Well, when he went in that ridiculously bad slump for like 6 games, which I still don't know if he was out of sync, if the injury caused him to change his form so that he came back and was healthy but couldn't correct it, and then finally has. That could be it. I really don't know what it is, but you're right. Like, even in a poor shooting game against Golden State, 9 for 25, he still had 53 fantasy points. In a bad shooting game against, so the Clippers game was real bad. And then the Utah game where he only shot 8 times, but he still had 41 fantasy points. Given the circumstances, it was pretty crazy. And then against Portland in that overtime win, he shot 7 for 23, but had 65 fantasy points because he got to the line a career high 20 times. I mean, Paul George finds ways to get it done, and I think that's what you were saying. With Westbrook off the court this year, he has a 35% usage rate, 714 minutes, by the way, 23% assist rate, 13.3% rebounding rate, and a 1.45 fantasy points per minute. The big thing here is that when you look at, normally you'd be like, okay, well, the point guard's out. Let's see what happens to George's usage. Let's see what happens to his assist rate. You probably wouldn't head right over to his rebounding rate, right? But with Westbrook, that's not the case. You do, because he just eats up so many boards that Paul George benefits in literally, almost every relevant statistical category for fantasy. Definitely the best player at the position. I don't care who he's playing.
It seems like, again, on a slate that has no real expensive players, he is your most and is somebody that has such a solid floor in this matchup with Westbrook off the floor.
I like Doncic a lot, though, too. I mean,
why not both?
Yeah, it's very easy,
Yeah.
Point guard, small forward for Doncic, small forward, power forward for George. It's not hard. I don't think you're going to want to play him at utility, but you literally don't have to. Doncic being priced below 9K on DraftKings is as egregious as George being priced at 9,700. And we've seen quite a bit of these erroneous price tags this year. Doncic at 98 on FanDuel, I don't even mind. Now he is shooting guard eligible, but still, you're getting a $900 discount over Beal. I do think, though, to some extent, that there is some fatigue setting in. And I don't think it's outlandish to think that, a Euro player coming over. He's been banged up a lot this season. He's played through most of it, but he's played 64 games. He's averaging over 32 minutes a night. And outside of that, he's not averaging 32 Dorian Finney-Smith minutes, right? He's not averaging 32 Kyle Singler minutes. He's averaging 32 minutes where he's doing everything on the team. There's no way he's not worn down. And we saw that kind of boil over when he shot 1 of 9 from the free throw line with 9 turnovers that other night. I look at the rebound game against the tough Denver team where they lost, very late in that game. Nikola Jokic, go back and watch that. Real great ending. Played 35 minutes. Doncic played 35 minutes. Shot, 10 for 23. Had 56 fantasy points. 1 assist shy of a triple double.
Right.
So he might be tired, but he's not done, and he hasn't played since the 14th. So you've had the 15th, 16th, and 17th to rest because he sat out. Doncic is a really great play as well. 2 guys at the top make this position easier than normal.
KD against San Antonio. Were you saying before that you have Kawhi doubtful for Monday, or did I mishear you before?
So what I had seen, the reports that I had seen were that Kawhi Leonard and Kyle Lowry were doubtful. Now, just pulling something up quickly here. So Leonard played on Sunday, right? So I don't see why he would play today. He played
Right.
36.
It's the load management, right? Yep.
Right. Like, I still don't think he's played a no, he hasn't played a back-to-back this season. And Kyle Lowry is not out for rest purposes. Kyle Lowry has an ankle injury. So right now I have both of them doubtful. Lowry for the ankle and Kawhi Leonard for obvious reasons. Until he plays a back-to-back, we must assume that he's not going to. The question is, what do you do here? Like Norman Powell, is that who you want? Is it going to be OG Anunoby, who on a per minute basis has been really, really underwhelming? I mean, there will be options. They are facing the Knicks too.
Right.
And if, I guess Anunoby probably plays, I don't know, I'd give him 27 minutes or so, maybe more. It's possible he plays more. But what do you think happens here with this team?
I think you get some Danny Green, probably more than you'd prefer minutes wise. You get Anunoby, and I'm not trusting any of them, but they're all three of them are sub 4K. And it's a Knicks matchup that should see plenty of offense. No real rim protection there. I know DeAndre Jordan's not terrible, but I think it's hold your nose and pick one if you're going this cheap and want some exposure to the Toronto lineup with those two guys out if Leonard is, in fact, out for the load management on Monday.
Just throwing it out there. So last game, Leonard sat. Patrick McCaw played 26 minutes. The starting lineup was Lowry, Green, McCaw, Siakam, Ibaka. That was the starting lineup. We've seen Nick Nurse change this up a lot this year. Against Detroit, when Leonard was out earlier in March, Nurse started Lynn and Lowry with Green, Siakam, and Gasol. So those are two different lineups there. Let's go. I just want two more here. Then in late February, it was Lowry, Green, Anunoby, Siakam, and Gasol. And then the one game prior to that, right? All of these are basically within a month of each other.
Yep.
And after the deadline, not that, it was Lowry, Green, Lowry, Green, Powell, Siakam, Ibaka. So 4 different starting lineups the last 4 times Kawhi Leonard has been out. 4 different starting lineups. And I'll do you one better. The 5th one prior was also different. Fred VanVleet started alongside Lowry with Green, Siakam, and Ibaka. We really don't have any clue.
So, yeah, you could get, well, I guess if Lowry's out, you have VanVleet at the 1. Right.
Will he start Lynn and Fred VanVleet? I mean, that'd be a terrible decision. I can't ever imagine him doing that. But
it's entirely possible.
Right. I mean, anything, every time Leonard sits, it seems to be something different. And it's not like there's 10 other guys that are injured, which is why it's forcing Nurse's hand. No, he's mixing things up, which, good for him, but I just don't know how to read it. And a lot of these guys like Powell and Anunoby aren't exactly high usage guys, but here's the big thing. If Lowry's going to be out as well, then VanVleet's not a high usage guy. I'm not saying Lowry is, but you're not replacing him with a high usage guy. So then who do you have? Siakam, obviously. Danny Green's just a spot up shooter.
Yep.
Who else in the starting lineup? So whoever starts is going to get opportunities. That's for sure.
We'll have to stay tuned on that one. Don't forget you get the NBA Strategy Show in the morning over there on YouTube, and you get the deep dive at 5 p.m. and then live before lock after that. So you want to stay tuned for all of this injury news to filter through starting lineups and more. What about the mid-tier of small forward? You have the likes of Porter Jr., Oubre, even DeRozan here at 7,800, and then make your way to the guys like Tatum, Parker, Thad Young. Rudy Gay has been really solid on a per-minute basis over the past 5 games or so, but hasn't been playing a ton of minutes. What do you got in the mid-tier of small forward?
You mentioned them. I think it's Oubre and Otto Porter. Both of these guys seeing quality playing time. Oubre in regulation over his last 2 has played 36 and 38 minutes. I think Tyler Johnson being out doesn't hurt him. Not a huge benefit, but doesn't hurt him either. And then Otto Porter, pretty similarly, he did only play 30 minutes last game, but I would expect him to get back up to around 33 minutes in this one. I actually prefer Oubre a little bit more, but both of these guys in the same matchup. Not the worst game stack here, especially at a power forward or a small forward position. Outside of the top, doesn't have much unless you want to talk about your value on the Toronto on a Toronto team that we don't really know what's going to happen, because right now there's nothing at the bottom that I'm excited about whatsoever.
All right, let's roll on to power forward. You get Paul George as your most expensive here.
Hey, good job, by the way.
On. Not saying let's move forward to power forward.
Yeah. I guess you did. You said roll on, right?
Yeah, I said roll on. Yeah.
So
it's funny. So those who've been listening for a long time probably remember the certainly debacle, which I think I said the word certainly 26 times.
Do. And you didn't see, for behind the scenes, anyone that's been listening to the show for a while knows they wouldn't know this part. After the show, I had mentioned it, and you didn't believe me. Right. And then you went back and listened, and later that night hit me up, and you're like, yeah, I think it was 30 times. So, yeah, that started this.
Oh, bad. I've been on the show I'm hosting over on Fantasy I didn't host this past Saturday, last Saturday. I said, listen 6 different times. Like, listen.
Yeah, I have a bad habit of that as well.
That's one of those moments where I'm like, of course they're listening. It's fucking radio, dude.
Yeah,
like,
you just sound like a condescending asshole.
Exactly.
Listen here, guy.
Exactly. Listen here, fella. You don't know what the hell you're doing. I in fact said towards the end, I was like, I'm going to say listen again. I know I sound like an idiot, but listen.
Yeah. One more
boy. For posterity. Power forward. So we have George, we have Leonard probably out. Aldridge is here at 8,100 against Golden State. Anthony Davis is up at 7,300 against Dallas. He's been performing in his short time out on the court. You have Randall at 8K. Let's see what else we got. Griffin is down to 7,200 on DraftKings here. Put up 39 points, 25 points, 8 rebounds, 3 assists last time out against Toronto on St. Patrick's Day. Then you have Markkanen at 7K. Siakam, as you said, Siakam, Porter Jr., Millsap, and on. Do you have a preference this early on George in power forward or small forward? Do you have that sort of take yet, or is that more for the deep dive tomorrow?
Generally speaking, it's going to be small forward. Just less quality options there is what is normally the case. And when you just take a cursory look at it, it's the same thing. Power forward isn't chock full of great plays,
right?
But it's better than small forward. And a few guys at the top that stand out. We talked about George. Julius Randle against Dallas. I'm not worried about Dirk Nowitzki, Dwight Powell front court. It's the furthest thing from concerning. And again, no Drew Holiday. Anthony Davis playing only 21 minutes. Julius Randle has been very good. Coming off that 77 fantasy point game against the Portland Trailblazers, just dropped a monster game. Of course, Anthony Davis was out, but still, it just goes to show you that Julius Randle does have a very high ceiling. I think that was the game. That must have been the one where he had 21 points in the first quarter. Yeah, it certainly wasn't the last one because he only had 21 points on the day. 21 points in the first quarter, finished with 45, 11, 6, 3, and 2, 77 fantasy points. Randall here against Dallas is a strong option, and he's still only 8K. He's not egregiously priced whatsoever. Blake Griffin's another one. I've been very cautious and tried to, caution our listeners and viewers and readers about Blake Griffin lately, because there are some things that concern me. One of them is I read a couple things from Piston beat writers and guys that cover the Pistons saying there's no question he's not fatigued right now. He has shouldered a huge load in Detroit. But also, over the past couple of months, teams have absolutely played him differently, knowing that, Drummond is not a long-range guy. Drummond gets it done. He dirty work, cleans up the garbage. He's a more talented offensive player than people give him credit for, but he's not jacking up 20, 25 footers. Reggie Jackson's all right, but he's not having a great season. And then look at the rest of the team. You're talking about guys like Wayne Ellington and Luke Kennard and Bruce Brown. This is not a scary team, or especially an imposing offense. So just collapse into the paint when Blake drives and take the risk elsewhere. Let him kick it out, or take bad shots, which is, if you go back and watch his field goal attempts, you can do it on NBA.com stats. You'll see that on any drives to the rack, they collapse and have made his life difficult. Now, with all that said, 7,200 against Cleveland, I'm willing to roll the dice here because he's still well above average passer for his position. He should still rebound decently. enough against this team. It's down Tristan Thompson, no Larry Nance, might not have Kevin Love. It's 7,200 is still at a point where you're like, all right, I will take that risk and I'll be okay with it not working out because 7,200 is cheap enough. But let's not ignore a couple of other things here. Pascal Siakam, 6,800. I mean, I personally think in a vacuum, I would take Siakam here. It doesn't mean I don't like Blake, but Siakam is facing an atrocious Knicks defense with no Lowry. Well, presumably no Lowry and no Leonard. He doesn't see the hugest per minute spike with Leonard off, but he's definitely going to see more usage. He's not expensive, and I'd expect him to play, 35 minutes here. So that he's just another one of many. I think Aldridge is okay. Definitely not at the top of my list. And then I'll throw this to you because I'm curious to know where you stand on him. Lauri Markkanen has just fallen off a metaphorical cliff. I mean, it's been rough, Dan. Look at his last 5 games where he's finished with, well, if you take his point totals, he hasn't eclipsed 20 points since March 1st against Atlanta, and that was an overtime game.
Right.
His rebounding totals are way down from what was really padding his stats earlier in the year. Now you've got 6 straight games, or what is it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 straight games with single digit, 8 or fewer rebounds in 6 of his last 7, and he's not contributing any defensive stats. So yeah, it's a great bounce back spot for Lauri Markkanen against the Suns. But what he's done recently certainly hasn't encouraged us.
Yeah, I'm not. I don't think I'm going to Markkanen here. I think you made points about guys just above and just below him. That where I was leaning as well. When you have Griffin just $200 more and Siakam $200 less, I'd rather take Siakam here, to be honest, with the Knicks matchup and go with it. I know Phoenix is a pace-up team. I get that it's, 3rd in pace on the year. And you can sort of point to with, they're a bad team, bad defense. They're going to run the ball a lot, and you're going to get more rebounding opportunities. But you just haven't seen it from him of late. And if he was cheaper, I think it would be a legitimate bounce back spot for me from a DFS perspective. But I think I'd rather go Siakam out of the 3 here and hope that the lack of Leonard and a lack of Kyle Lowry makes this game closer, and Siakam has to sort of shoulder more of that offensive load than we've seen in the past.
Yep, and I think he will. Blake Griffin, by the way, up until February, was averaging 1.27 fantasy points per minute and 1.27 fantasy points per minute and 32% usage. You look at him since the start of February, and his usage is down about 3% to 29, fantasy points at 1.17. So is it a huge drop off? No, but you aren't paying $9K for this guy anymore. And we're seeing that because people aren't paying for him. But at 7,200, I'm on board just because I don't see there being a ton of risk. Also, Marcus Morris, I think we're expecting Gordon Hayward to sit, so he should get a little bit extra run. Jeremy Grant is okay. I actually don't hate that price point. With Westbrook off the court, rebounding total should improve. Once you get down a little bit further, it's pretty ugly, though. I don't see anyone right now that's popping out. I'll definitely dig a little bit deeper for today's article. But right now, outside of guys that we talked about at small forward or have already mentioned it at power forward, there's not much at the bottom.
I will happy to report that the Certainly episode on the Fantasy Insiders podcast was December 7th of 2015, and I actually still have the audio clip that I put together, so I can share that on Twitter later on for all of the 2 people who care about it. But let's close it out, talk centers, and be done. Again, reminder, Dave has you on the deep dive write-up. You need to be a member of Osmo.com to read that. Adam is on the strategy show with Josh first thing Monday morning. I say that hoping Adam actually has he bought a new laptop? Has that happened?
Of course not. Of course not.
Guy's username is I'm a boss on Twitter. Come on. FanDuel, pardon me. Let's talk next about center, where we have a top end that has some of the stars we often, lean on. But again, it's no one over 10K. This is a slate that is much more balanced. So wondering where you see yourself going. Jokic against Boston. We've seen nice rebound rates against Boston, but their defense has definitely been improved. You have Drummond against a front court in Cleveland that should be pretty much down. And then even if Love is out too, Gobert against Washington, Aldridge, Randall, and we get some of the guys who are MPE. Of the top three, Gobert, Drummond, and Jokic, do any of the three make it into your plans for Monday night?
Well, the answer is yes. Now, I meant to mention, Blake Griffin is actually questionable. Some whispers that he might sit for rest purposes. I don't know if that's the case. Jokic getting ejected the other day really sucked. He was already not playing all that great, and then he gets ejected in the final few minutes of that one. Wasn't huge on that. I don't think I go there today. I will say, though, anytime Jokic is this price, he has as high a ceiling as anybody on this slate, if not higher, which still puts him in play. Not in love with him, though. I still like Paul George more and a couple other guys we talked about. I also like Drummond, 8,600 on DraftKings against the Cleveland Cavaliers. What is there not to like at that price point? I mean, he's 10-3 on FanDuel, and I still think he's in play. Really like Drummond here. He should just annihilate this front court in the paint, on the boards, on putbacks, you name it. He's also great at racking up blocks and steals, so he pads those totals. And Rudy Gobert is another one. Rudy Gobert is also a very good play, which means that Jokic probably won't be a priority for me. I really like Drummond. I really like Gobert. I haven't made lineups yet, but those are just a couple of guys. And then you also have to bring up Marc Gasol, who, if he starts, assuming he does, he's going to be forced to shoulder a heavier offensive load also as a facilitator. So let's just say that Kawhi Leonard and Kyle Lowry are out and Marc Gasol plays 30-plus minutes. Well, he's only played 61 minutes with those guys off the floor since coming to Toronto, but he's averaging 1.3 fantasy points per minute, 21% usage, 15% assists, and 16% rebounding. Nothing spectacular, but are you really afraid of Gasol here with those guys out facing the New York Knicks? I don't think so.
There are some guys here in the mid-tier I want to get your quick thoughts on. One, Nurkic against the Pacers at 7,100. Does have what seems to be a bit of a minutes restriction just because the way they play out there, where he's not playing in the high 30s, you get 20s a lot of the time. Wondering about his price point. And then DeAndre Ayton is the other one, another guy whose minutes have been fluctuating pretty wildly at times this season. Either of them intriguing to you on this slate?
Yeah, I don't love the matchup for Nurkic, but I love the price, and sometimes that's all that matters. And we've seen that Terry Stotts is willing to give him more minutes when he's playing well. He played 34 minutes against the Spurs on Saturday. So it's not out of the realm of possibilities. Now, Enes Kanter being in the rotation definitely makes it so more times than not, Nurkic is going to play around 29, 30 minutes, which sucks. But again, it is baked into his price point. 7,100 for a guy that's averaging like 1.4 fantasy points per minute this year. That he's fine with me. He's not a top option because I don't like playing bigs against the Pacers. But at that price, much like we said about, Paul George,
right?
It's much less concerning when you're getting those types of matchups. Dwight Powell is another one. I think Powell's fine against New Orleans. Hopefully Carlisle continues to give him, big minutes every night. Played 30 minutes last game, 29 and 36, 39. I think if it's close, he will, and I'd expect this game to be close. There's no reason for it not to be. Both teams are not playing to win right now. Do we have a line on it? We don't yet. We don't have a total on this game, or a line from what I'm seeing. I expect it to be, within a couple points. Nothing noteworthy at all. Anyone else you see here at center, Dan?
There are just a couple of names here quickly to get your take on. Any of these Washington centers interesting as off-the-radar plays against Gobert? I know we've talked about his defense not being as good this season. And thoughts on the New York Knicks center DeAndre Jordan, who's turned back the clock the past two games the 2 games prior to Sunday's game. No, it was Sunday too. All right, so he had a double-double Sunday and a double-double on March 15th, a double-double back on against the Pacers, 12 and 16. Has a matchup here with Toronto and obvious changes in those lineups. So either DeAndre Jordan or any of the centers for the Washington Wizards.
Jordan's also averaging 33 minutes per game over his last 3 starts, which is pretty encouraging. I don't have an issue with him at 5,800. Actually, it's good value. Forget who he's playing. It doesn't matter whether it's Toronto, Utah. If he's 5,800, big double upside. I like it. Hell, against the Lakers, he came 3 assists shy of a triple-double. Pretty incredible. The game before that, he came 1 assist shy of a triple-double, and he now has 21 assists over his last 3 games. Imagine that, Dan. That's crazy. I mean, really, that's insane. And with Dennis Smith Jr. off the floor, I think it would actually help him from a facilitating perspective. I don't mind him. Bobby Portis and the centers for Washington, in this spot, their minutes are already volatile enough. I'd probably just stay away, given the matchup that doesn't really make it any more appealing, actually much less appealing. And I'll throw Jigic out there. If Kevin Love joins Nance and Thompson on the sidelines, then, even if he doesn't, you're going to get 30 minutes from Jigic.
Right.
If he does, I wouldn't be surprised to see him play another 34, 35 like he did against the 76ers. Wasn't good, hasn't been great, but he's still very inexpensive. And whether or not Larry Drew is actually looking to win games, I lean towards the latter. You're still going to play, and I would assume you're still going to run Jigic out there against such a massive front court. Like, I don't think you want to get embarrassed. You still don't want to make stupid decisions. So I think Jigic gets a ton of run against this Detroit team. You could do a lot worse at 4K on DraftKings.
All right, that's where we're going to leave it. Do have to get Dave's take here. So, Dave, of all the players above 10K, who's your favorite on the slate?
That's an easy one.
So let's do 9K and above. We'll go Lillard, Kyrie, Jokic, Curry, Beal, and Paul George.
Definitely Paul George at the top for obvious reasons. And then we are waiting on the Cousins news. That could change a lot as far as Curry goes, but Paul George at the top. And I really like Kyrie Irving here at 9,100. Bradley Beal as well. One of those spots where matchup doesn't matter, but definitely Paul George at the top.
All right. Find Dave on Twitter at Lofty_D, LOUGHY_D. Find me at Dan Straff. And of course, it's at awesomeo_com for awesomeo.com on the Twitter machine. Tomorrow morning, you get EMAC and you get Adam here on the DFS Early Bird. And again, starting you off in the morning, NBA Strategy Show, Josh and Adam. Then you get Dave and Adam on the deep dive. And then live before lock, typically Spags and Ed Fear, bringing you up to lock each and every night over on YouTube. Dave has the deep dive during the day. That's behind the paywall. Use the promo code EARLYBIRD to get yourself 50% off the first month at awesomeo.com. Thanks so much for listening to the DFS Early Bird presented by awesomeo.com.